All right, let's get started here today. Thank you all for coming. It's so sad that so few are interested in this topic. It's kind of crazy, but I think next month we're going to reserve the roof deck for overflow seating. All right, I am Dean Andrews. I am Head of Developer Relations at InterSystems. I promise I will not keep you waiting too long in front of these very cool presentations that we have tonight. I want to ask a few questions just so I get a sense of the audience. Please raise your hands. How many of you have never heard of InterSystems before? All right, thank you. How many are familiar with InterSystems and our technology? Awesome, thank you. How many of you are working in healthcare, either a healthcare organization or a healthcare professional? Fantastic. How many of you would consider yourselves developers? All right. How about data scientists? Great. How about product owners or product managers? Very cool, very diverse. Finally, last question is, who is working in startups or startup ecosystem, founders, venture capital? Fantastic. Wow, what a great audience today. For those who have never heard of InterSystems, here's just one brief slide about us, and of course you can chat with some of the InterSystems staff. They're here today. You'll see it on our name tags. InterSystems is a technology company, 45 years old. We are headquartered right across the street at One Memorial Drive. We produce data platform technology, and we've been working, building, and innovating ourselves and with our customers and partners for 45 years. And we've become the world's most popular health data platform. To give you a sense of this, we have customers and partners in over 100 countries. Over 1 billion patient records are managed on InterSystems technology. About 2/3 of the patient records in the United States. We are considered a global leader in data management, data interoperability, and analytics. Customers and partners use our technology because of the performance, scalability, and reliability. For those in the startup ecosystem, I want you to know that we have a comprehensive startup program and a corporate venture fund to help accelerate innovation in healthcare, financial services, and supply chains in the industries in which we work. And we are hiring. We have over 200 job openings. I am hiring a developer evangelist, so please reach out. Last slide from me is simply about these developer meetups. We do things a little bit differently than typical developer meetups, which are kind of focused on one technology topic, and they keep doing variations on that technology topic. We are interested in data and working with data in these key industries, healthcare, financial services, supply chain, and any topics that relate to data management, data interoperability, analytics, and building and innovating with data on all of these variety of topics. So please check us out for our future meetups. You can register right now for our next one. It's on August 26th. We are doing these meetups in this room every month, about the last week of every month. And I'm sure all of you from those different backgrounds will find topics of interest. And if you have any suggestions for future topics that you would be interesting to you, please reach out. That's my email right there. At this point, I am going to pass it off to Nicholai. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Dean. And for anyone who thinks after this next presentation, I have a good idea, or you want to use large language models in a startup capacity, certainly feel free to reach out to Dean, either with his LinkedIn or his email down at the bottom. So, let me get into it. This will be about a 10 to 15-minute presentation. I call it a practical guide. Think of it large language models 101 plus a demo in healthcare. And really, what you should get out of this presentation at the end is have an understanding of the guardrails in healthcare that might be a little bit different than if I was going to go into retail, or if I was going to go into e-commerce, or just build a website that integrates large language models in some way or another. So, to introduce myself, I'm Nicholai. Oh, and here's the agenda. I'll start with an introduction. I'll go over large language models in healthcare. And I've got a few tips and tricks. If you want to actually deploy or create a solution or do something in healthcare or any other regulated industry, heavily regulated industry, with large language models. So let's get going. On the left, I've got my LinkedIn. If you want to connect, you have any questions, you want to know code samples, scan the code on the left. By all means, totally up to you. But I work at InterSystems. I manage 10 solution engineers right here in Kendall Square. Our building is right outside that window. If you want to look, it's right next to the Sloan School at MIT. And I have experience not only in healthcare, but in AI. So that begins with motion detection systems I did during my undergrad thesis. I built homegrown RNN-based email generation systems, helpers for responding to questionnaires, and even medical large language models, which you'll see a demo later today. And I share all of it open source, so InterSystems is not in the business to actually sell large language models. I know I heard a few people asking about this. Anything that I do is open source and sort of done on my own time, but the way we think about things is how do we use the data in healthcare correctly when using a large language model. So this is a little bit about me. Hopefully that was enough time to scan the QR code. And a little bit about my background. I started in 2016 with AI, doing emotion detection systems. And so, as you can see, at November 3rd, 2016 at 3:15 a.m., for some reason, I'm happy. It's probably because the ML model finally trained correctly. And I stuck with it. Even though my day job is healthcare, I love things like large language models. So I actually published publicly open source medical assistant large language models. With the caveat, do not use this in the medical setting. Research only. You can use it personally. And there's lots and lots of things to be excited about in healthcare. One of the things is I may know nothing about how to treat a patient. And where large language models really help is getting to that 80%. So not to become a true 100% expert, but 80% of the way there. So let's get into it a little. Who here knows what a large language model is? Who here knows what the difference between that and ChatGPT is? Who's used ChatGPT? All right. Now, I think it's magic. That's what a large language model is. You give it some text, out comes magic. It answers your question. How does this AI model know the answer to the question? Well, in actuality, it's just a model that's trained to respond in a certain way. Just takes some text, gives you the next text. And it's trained on a variety of data. Really, it's sequence to sequence, so data in to data out. And one of the key things that I'll go into is large hardware requirements. Really huge. I'm not talking like, hey, I bought a graphics card for my consumer grade PC. I'm talking like you gotta call someone up to buy this hardware. That's how expensive it is. And some examples you may know of generative AI, that's the larger subset of what large language models fall into. Meta, I would say that they've really pushed the boundaries with their open source models, Llama 2 and Llama 1. OpenAI, everyone knows ChatGPT, GPT-4. Stability AI, so who knows what stable diffusion is? Give it text and out comes an image. That's pretty cool as well. And Google AI, who actually invented the model underneath the transformer model. And so, why does this matter in healthcare? Well, healthcare has a lot of problems, and we're trying very hard to solve them. So, how do we revolutionize the way that care is delivered? How do we reduce cost? How do we make sure that healthcare organizations are being more prescriptive and accurate in the way that they treat patients? So, hey, who's here has gone to the doctor and had something bad happen? So, I wish that large language models were there. They could say, hey, doctor, don't do it this way. So, what really is a large language model? If you understand what this means on the screen, forget it. It's okay if this is too in-depth. What you should really think about it is that there's some input and an output. And And so the process of training this architecture underneath, really what it does is it just gets the inputs and the outputs to get closer to your training data. So you give an input text that says, hey, how do you treat this patient? The output says, here, step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so the way I want to think about large language models is this is a model that's trained on lots of data, particularly in healthcare. We have to be very careful of how the data is trained. So a lot of the current large language models you can use lots of web scrape data, human feedback, manual edits. So this part scares me is, what if you don't like treating a certain thing? You can actually manually edit that out of a large language model. And data dumps of public sources. So you see language models trained on tons and tons of textbooks. So are those textbooks right? Are they wrong? Are they updated data? Are they current data? It's all things we got to think about. And so let's get a little bit into the meat. What does a large language model really do? Well, take away all the magic, take away all the allure, the cool wow factor you get from ChatGPT. All it really does is say, take this input, and it converts it to a set of numbers, runs the model, and out comes some output. So if I ask the model, how do I attend developer meetups for free food? It says, use the meetup group. So who here found this with meetup.com? That's right, free food, and you can ask AI for this. Now that's pretty cool. Someone on the internet must have said this somewhere. And it turns out, and I'm going to ask a question before I move to the next slide, how come everyone just doesn't have this running on their phone today? Who here has a large language model running on their phone? Really?
On the phone.
That's cool. The problem is, you need to make these things huge to get them to have cool outputs. And so, ignore the research here at the bottom, but this is a size measured in millions and billions of numbers or parameters. Basically, how big is your model? And this shows the response rate that are accurate, and this is 10%, this is 50%, for different sizes for trivia Q&A. So I'm asking trivia questions, it turns out just make the model bigger, same training data, you get more accurate output. And so that's the real problem in healthcare is you can't really use a cloud service, and I'll get to a little bit more of that later. So how do we actually use large language models in healthcare? Well, this is the problem space, particularly in the provider market. So if you're a healthcare provider, you're a clinician, you're someone who goes to the hospital, the patient is at the middle. There's only one Nicholai. It's only one of everyone, I hope. And what you have all these different segments of data that need to be put together. You have EMR data, electronic medical record, labs, imaging, you have insurance data, you may be in a clinical trial. Who here is in biomedical research or works for a pharmaceutical? Anyone? Yeah. So you're working, you might maybe working with trial data, or what they call patient-reported outcomes, real-world evidence, real-world data. That's really important, and it's not all in one place. So how do we actually make use of large language models in this complex data space? Well, we need, if you're at the point of care, you need a digital front door. How come I could go to the airport and check in to my flight, not talk to anyone, go through security on my phone? But it's probably not the same way in healthcare. So patients want faster access and personalization to their experience. For clinical trials, all of this data needs manual review. You might be dealing with text documents, unstructured reports. Someone has to go through that data, line by line, and actually make sense of it. Maybe even copy, paste, entering, paid per hour. That's an expensive process. And this middle one is probably the most important, is there's a huge administrative overhead for at least US healthcare. Last time I checked, it's about $1 trillion. So to administer healthcare, just the coordination is about a quarter of the cost of healthcare. Now, what if a large language model could schedule you, tell you you need to schedule a follow-up, go here, go there, give you directions? We can automate a lot of this. Not today, maybe in a year, probably in 5 to 10 years, but we should start thinking about it now. And then things like a point-of-care assistant. Could a doctor ask a large language model with MedGPT, not ChatGPT, for questions and answers and get something back that's accurate? So here's the problem space. I have some ideas on how we get out here on the right, and Google's already doing this. As you may be wondering, they've started a trial with the Mayo Clinic for what they call MedPalm, their chip, COM is their ChatGPT or GPT competitive architecture. And so at the Mayo Clinic, they're actually trying this out at the point of care with doctors, and they're seeing good results. In fact, and she will talk, the next presenter will talk about this, large language models actually are shown to be more empathetic and have higher accuracy, at least for patient messages. Now that's scary. If you ever message your doctor says, yeah, get this test. That's not very empathetic, you know. People care about feelings, although in medicine we maybe gloss over that fact. So, how do we actually use this today? Well, here's an architecture that works very well in healthcare. It's called in-context learning, which means you don't need to train another model. You don't need to go and make a huge hardware requirement or hardware expenditure. I don't need to go to NVIDIA and say, yeah, here's my next year's capital budget of $2 million. Send me some GPUs, please. Instead, you can take a large language model and take in-context data. In this case, that is what's in Nicholai's medical record, what is in a clinical trial, maybe even what is my genetic report. And all that is just context data to a base large language model. And there's a nice flow here I propose. Pre-process, make sure you encode the data, embed it, construct your prompt, retrieve the data, execute it, and then validate it. But what I really want to point out too is validation and auditing is really important. What happens if I do all the steps, the output looks great, the nurse stabs me with something and says, hey, yeah, this is going to fix your problem, and there's no validation or auditing? Then we're going to need to capture all the inputs and outputs, the data lineage, all of the different auditing that's required in healthcare, particularly HIPAA and all the other requirements, to actually make sure whatever a large language model is treated as if we created it. So that's a concept I want to say is large language models don't replace people, they help people, and we have to treat their output as if we offer it. So since I am from InterSystems, we do have a common architecture we see. So all the data here on the left, we have a pipelining functionality and features. We have the way to make sure that the data is in the right format. And this LLM processing that you can see here on the right, really the retrieval and augmentation of your data, InterSystems can help with that. That's what we do all day, every day with both EMR vendors, trial vendors, laboratory, hospitals. We can really help with all those different, with a nice architecture. Data coming in on the left, process the data with your large language models, and integrate that back into the point of care. And the impact is we can actually reduce medical waste. So we can automate data entry, we can optimize workflows, now improve note accuracy with large language model authoring. So one of our best partners, and their name is Epic, so if you're familiar with at the Epic Corporation, they are the largest EMR vendor in the United States. They've publicly stated they have plans to actually automatically author notes at the point of care. So we'll have a microphone device, just like I have right here. They'll feed the data to a nice model that will pull back anything that's said during a doctor's visit and automatically offer a note. And the doctor has to sign off on it. Now that's pretty cool. One of the also really cool things is that there's something called an MOE model, or mixture of experts or expertise. And what that means is it's not just text to text. It could be text to images in text, or images in text to text. But imagine if you could take a radiology report and you could say, I've got this radiology report, this slice of an MRI, what does it mean? And you might say, hey, your tendon is torn. So there's a lot of different ways we can apply large language models. And really, I think the winner is going to be who can do one of these things. In any of these spaces, the winner is going to be who can do one of these things really well. It's not going to be who can do all of it. It's going to be who can be the best of breed at automating data entry or creating an MRI large language model. So, of course, we got to do a demo. So, before I do a demo, I got to tell a story. This is me. And no, this isn't. I'm not on Days of Our Lives. This was me about 4 weeks ago. And so, over the past year, I had torn a few tendons in my shoulder, and what happened was the initial surgery got infected. So, not good. I had a bad thing happen at the doctor. Went back for another surgery. Okay, now I'm doing more tests, more MRIs. They're doing reports. They're sending me to infectious disease. And then again, I have to go back for another surgery, another MRI. And it says osteomyelitis. What's osteomyelitis? Who knows what osteomyelitis is? Not that many people.
Sounds like a bone problem.
Who knows what stippled foci is? Exactly. So what the inspiration for what I'm about to show you is, I didn't have any idea what was going on with my medical test. I didn't know what it was saying. And I would get the test result the day of, and I would have a follow-up a week later. And so it was killing me on the inside to say, I have no idea what's wrong with me. So what I did was I found an open source set of data, basically data sets, flashcards. I took some open source medical textbooks. I encoded them and I fine-tuned the machine learning model. And so what I'm going to show you in a second is the output of what it could do. So let me just make sure I didn't put anything on the next slide. Okay. So I'm going to kick out and I share all these actually publicly. So this isn't part of InterSystems. This is sort of my own little side project. And yes, I did have to call up NVIDIA to buy some graphics cards. So what you're seeing here is, and this is big enough? No, let's get bigger. This is my MRI contrast. This is the report. It says I've got MRI with and without contrast. I've got a sort of a tendon that was repaired last year. Findings. I've got susceptibility. I've got surgical anchors that are in the right place. I've got peristeal edema. What does any of this mean? Well, good news is I can ask the AI model what it means. Now, should you use this at the point of care? No. But can you use this as a patient who wants to learn more about what's going on with them? Sure. So the way I used it is I said, hey, AI model, based on the MRI impression, suggest 5 questions I should ask. How can I be a more informed patient? I don't know what I don't know. So I said, hey, the AI model came back and said, and I'll just regenerate it to show that this isn't fake. What is the significance of bone marrow edema? I don't know what that means. The doctor's going to tell me. What is the suspected infection, which is actually what I had, was an osteomyelitis, a bone infection. What is long-term prognosis and complications? Well, it should clear up after a few weeks of antibiotics. You know, my lymph nodes are enlarged. What does that mean? Well, it's probably the infection. We'll check on it. And just like that, I can ask the AI model how to be a more informed patient. So I am being a better patient. My doctor is happy because I'm asking the right questions. And my physician and my infectious disease doctor doesn't have to explain 900 things. So this is a really cool use case. And you can kind of ask the AI model to do whatever I want. So let's say I'm in the clinical trial space. I saw someone smiling over there when I said clinical trials. What if I want to submit this to a trial, but I don't want them to know it's me? Well, and let me just copy what I had earlier. Let me remove all identifying information. So, has anyone ever tried to de-identify a clinical note? Has anyone done it in 30 seconds? So I'm going to remove all identifying information about me and my physician, the PA in this case. And let's see how it does. Boom. Outcomes, de-identify data. Now, here is where I want to talk about guardrails. What if it didn't do the right job? Someone still needs to verify this on health information, data release. Anyone at a CRO or a clinical research organization or a pharma still needs to go through the MRI result and make sure that it still contains everything that should have been out of there. There still needs to be a guardrail here. But hey, this is better than having to go through it and de-identify it myself and take a few hours to do it correctly. So yes, we can play around with the knobs and the buttons and everything that's going on in the background to get a more accurate response here. But this is really cool from my standpoint. I love technology. I love things like this where I can be a better patient, I can be a better person, I can know more. This is a helpful use case. So I don't think large language models are really going to replace doctors soon, but you could do things like this. Make the whole experience a lot easier. And if you have any questions about this, I'll ask you to save them to the end and come up to me personally, because I could go on for hours about this. So I want to go into something important. Is the hype worth it? There's tons of hype. ChatGPT reaches 1 million users in 10 days. there's MedPalm, there's Google, there's all these copycats, there's fine tuning, there are people who are making Worm GPT. So who knows what Worm GPT is? So Worm GPT helps you write phishing emails. It costs $1,000 a year. So there's a lot of hype around this space. There's tons of VC money being thrown around. In healthcare, we have to be really careful. There are data privacy requirements. There's data co-location requirements. HIPAA compliance. There's the who do you sue problem. Who do you sue? Who do you sue if the large language model told your doctor to inject something and it should tell us the wrong thing? Is it the doctor's fault? Is it whoever made the language model? You know, these are the questions we have to ask. And hardware requirements are gigantic. You can't really use cloud services for healthcare because very few healthcare companies are comfortable having cloud services host their data. So you have to figure out, how do I buy a GPU, put it on site, make sure that it runs? What happens if that instance goes down? There's a lot of thought going into this. And really, it's procure hardware. That's going to be a big problem for healthcare organizations. So for the first three, for operations and administration, I think there's a huge opportunity here. If you have any ideas how you can streamline any operations or administrative use case, maybe de-identifying clinical notes is sort of on the edge of that, but how do I better schedule people? Who's the right doctor I should refer them to? That is a place where I think there's going to be a huge winner in the next few years, and it's going to save someone a lot of money. So if you're looking to save a hospital a lot of money, look at this first use case. It's 1/4 of our entire healthcare cost. As a medical assistant, I'm not so sure. What happens if the model hallucinates? You don't want the finger pointing game in a lawsuit. You know, I don't want Google's MedPalm pointing at Mayo going, no, you said this, but you did it. No, it's not a fun game to be in. And data entry, another winner. If you can figure out how to automate data entry, the EMR vendors are already thinking about this. So, tips and tricks. With all that, there's a lot of cool stuff. There's a lot of opportunity. But if you're looking to build any solution, do you really need a large language model? I would say if it has to do with free text or expensive human intervention, go for it. You don't need to retrain or fine-tune to start with a use case. And base models work, but you have to keep in mind PHI, HIPAA, GDPR, data co-location. Make sure that you have a lawyer who's good, who knows healthcare, that is going to be able to guide you. What are the guardrails for your large language model? And save everything. In healthcare, most states require you 7 to 10 years to save all data. So think about before you use a large language model in production, that you're going to need to save most of this data. You need to save the input, the output, the random seed used to generate the output. You know, that entire lineage in all industry or in all sub-segments of healthcare are really important. So make sure you think this through before you just design and build a solution. So that's the end. To summarize, large language models, they really just predict the next token. But we've tricked them, just like we tricked rocks to become computers, we've tricked large language models to become thinkers. So if our greatest achievement is just that, the way to think about it is large language models really just predict the next token. There's tons of opportunity in healthcare, specifically to improve cost, and operations and administration are where we should look first. It's where most of our cost is, it's where 1/4 of the dollars are being spent. It's where a hospital CIO or CEO or CFO will say, I'll sign up for this if you can prove that you save me money. And trust me, they'll be chomping at the bit. And the final thing is, put in some guardrails. Make sure that for research, there's a human review. And like all technologies, if you use it too much, it becomes a crutch, and you lose your own expertise. So with that, I thank you all for listening to my 15-minute discussion on large language models. If you have any questions, please come up to me after Chi's presentation. But if you're looking for, all right, this is very pie in the sky, great demo, you want to see how this actually works for a real use case, you'll see one of these models in action, actually with a real life use case with Chi's next presentation. So thank you all.
Great. Thank you, Nicholai. All right. So we want to put the doctors aside and put the focus back on the patient. And But before I do that, I just want to mention a couple of things. The first, a fun fact. Anybody interested in the stars in the sky? If you ever look it up, it's like somebody must be keeping track of it. Okay, right? So that's European Space Agency. Guess what database technology that they use to keep track of all the stars and making sure they don't collide to each other? That's us. So if you forget everything, right, today, just say that's the company that maps stars. Okay? That's one thing. And the second thing I want to mention is the company's success is built on developers. And this is so critical. The CEO, the number one thing is developers. We have much higher hiring standards for developers than people like me who are non-developers. And so in every way, we're trying to help our developers, the other developers, not just ours, to be successful. That's very important, just to emphasize. And so today, for this part, I'll talk about a real project that we're working on, and it goes a little bit deeper, very concrete. Let's just smile again. So, do you guys write messages to your doctors or nurses on a patient portal?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah? Have you been writing more and more since COVID?
Yep.
Yes. That's right, yeah. And it's a headache for them. To the point they want to charge you money, right? You saw the Cleveland Clinic, and late last year, they're gonna charge you. And clinical in nature, which could be, I got a new symptom, I don't know what it is, I'd like to change my meds, what do you think? And Cleveland Clinic will charge you, if you're in commercial insurance, that will be between 30 and 50 bucks, because their messages doubled since COVID, and the before and after, right? And the secondly is there have been published paper, this is from UC San Diego, talk about 50,000 messages per month before the pandemic, after is 80, during the pandemic it was 140,000. A lot of messages, a lot of increase. And hospital, they don't know how to deal with it, and they're just like, it's way too much, right? Now, why is it a problem for the doctors? Every message, they will spend additional 2.3 minutes in EHR. So if a physician receives 100, think about suddenly you're asked by your company to spend another, let's say, 230 minutes, right? You're not going to be happy about it. They usually reply in the middle of the night, because that's the only time they can do it, after put their kids to bed and stuff like that. And it's just very expensive, right? And so what causes is lots of physician burnout. I don't know, outside the healthcare industry, you guys hear about it, but physician burnout is quite real. And a lot of them are bothered by the messages. Some of these messages are not necessary for the patient. The system generates lots of messages, algorithm in the EHRs. And so this one is, it was a survey on close to 1,000, I think, physicians in one of the large practices. And it was just way too many messages. So half of them are generated by the EHR itself, about 12% are from patients. So it's very important problem. So when we think about it, say, wow, large language model can do something here. So we did this at this hospital. It's Western Massachusetts, and so you might have heard of Tingle. So Springfield is along the way, and it's just Western Mass, and most of the Western healthcare is delivered as provided by this organization, 5 hospitals, and they take care of a lot of patients. The message volume, they have a contact center, so they do a fair amount of encouraging patients to send messages before COVID, and of course it increased quite a bit. And for the study, for this project, they have about, in general, about 1,000 messages per day that go to the contact center. Somebody has to review and then triage. About half of them are what we call general or medical questions. So the clinical team were quite concerned. What happened is, patient might say, I need appointment in the medical category of a message. And so the medical team is like, wow, this must be medical. No, it's not. It's about appointment request. And what's more important is that also a lot of the important critical messages are really just sent as a general message. So the clinical team is like, wow, this is important, and we should do something more timely, assuming ideally if there's a mechanism that can automatically automatically say these messages are important. Somebody needs to call the patient within 2 hours, for example. And so this is very important. So we thought about using a large language model in general, the machine learning as well. So so there are a lot of messages. The coordinator team, they have to sort them, filter them, forward them. They have a very manual triage process, just like many institutions. And patients are putting all kinds of messages in content in the messages. So from the workflow point of view, we looked at a few areas, which I will dive a little bit deeper. But the key thing is how to automatically indicate, is the message urgent? And so somebody needs to take care of right away. And another important part of it is with a lot of these messages, I don't know if any of you write really lengthy messages, but a lot of patients do. And so it takes a while to read them, right? And you want to make sure you don't miss any keywords. And so, well, maybe large language model can do something there by creating a 2-word summary. I'm not, making you feel bad. All my message is going to read by a machine, and now all the lengthy, kind of a prose is going to turn into 2 words. And but this really helps with the triage, so the message can be processed more quickly. And also from a patient portal user experience point of view, there's a way to direct. And so a patient might say, oh, I have a medical question, but it turns out it's a formal request. There's a much faster way to put it into the appointment request work. So this has also become a very useful thing to automate some of the patient experience. So the clinical team came up with this the definition of urgent. And so any doctor, you'll say, wow, the red flag, these are like really urgent. You've got to call 911, right? And a warm transfer is like somebody needs to contact the patient, start getting the patient, review the patient to see if they need to be immediately assessed, or they need to be seen either in the clinic or go to the hospital or urgent care centers. All these are fairly important. Now, some of the folks was the same thinking at the hospital, say, why don't we do a keyword search? This could be a good way to do it, right? And so there is we build a model. We did actually a test around the string search, and also the traditional language, traditional NLP analysis as well to build a model. So an actual urgent message, this is de-identified. It was one example. We did 1,000 messages through a manual labeling, and this was a real message. And if you look at it, oh my goodness, is the patient having a heart attack right now? Quite a few in a way. It was just like really serious. But that's the type of message some patients are sending the patient portal. And it doesn't happen very often, but if it does happen, that's somebody's life at stake, right? So you need to take action right away. So what we did is we have a group of clinicians, and using the guidelines, and we manually labeled 1,000 messages. About 36 of them were viewed as urgent. There's one of them, which is the one that we showed you earlier, is a 911 message. Somebody has to just go to the patient's house right now. And so basic string search performance, it got like a 6 out of 36. And so that's the kind of performance that you're looking at. And we also developed additional models, the traditional ML model, not using the pre-trained language model. And that's number 1. Number 2, we use the BERT. And then the third one is BioBERT. It's trained on mimic data. So it's a large language model developed by one of the researchers in the local hospitals here. And we had the additional machine learning tuning, and so just quite a few ways to make it a little bit more, make it a better performance. So in the end, we're able to achieve this kind of ROC curve, and you see for the final optimized model is a 0.93. And so it turns out that there are quite a few other institutions in the country. NYU is one of them. They're also doing something similar. They also published a paper, and there are other organizations. There's another hospital also does this type of analysis as well. And everybody tried the different kind of language models as well to see which one is the perform the best. And so 0.93 is kind of the best you can get. Right? Now, the important part of it is that the accuracy, because the urgent is also a little bit subjective in a way, so you never get to 100%. So somewhere 0.93 is probably also the best you could get, you know, in a practical sense as well. Now, embedding into workflow is so key. You know, anybody who worked in ML or machine learning models in a hospital, you know, I got a model, it's perfect, but workflow team is like, I don't want to deal with the notification or alert because I don't know what to do with it. It's extra time, I have to review it and this and that. And when you look at additional time that's invested, it's not even worth it, right? So workflow integration is very key. So what we did is to embed it into the triage process. Because most of these messages are already viewed by somebody in the contact center. So we want to be providing something that it's within their workflow so they can take action quicker. And so there are several areas that we did, using navigation assistance for the patient, the urgent messages prioritization, message summarization, the two-word summary I was talking about, and the suggested response. That was the one that Nicholai was talking about in one of the study, and that was also published. And the reviewers, they're human, they rated the ChatGPT response as 45% are sympathetic, and the physicians are 4%, 10 times more likely. So if you get a message that's really just short and not very empathetic, you guarantee it's from a human. And the machine will do much better. Yeah, very reassuring and everything. And, but that's what we needed, right? To make patients feel better. Now, this is navigation assistant. This is using one of the patient portal on a mobile interface, and you're typing in a particular request and about appointment request. And if you're typing a message, when you hit send, we say, well, there's another workflow you can go through, which is a little bit easier, can immediately give you all the choices and so on and so forth. And because the options are already available, it's just sometimes patients say, I didn't even know whether the option exists, right? So this will help you reduce the appointment request messages that goes to the contact center. So they can, it's another way of pruning the messages. In the urgent messages, this is where we are inserting a new column called urgent. Is it yes or no? And so if you zoom it a bit, I thought it was bigger, but the column will say it's in a frame, it's a new column. So all the messages that marked urgent will rise to the top. A typical workflow is early in the morning, the contact center people will come back, and there's a lot of patients send messages at night. And so they will review the messages, spend an hour, and they review them, and take care of the ones that are urgent. So this will help them to really clear out all the urgent messages, take care of them right away. So this becomes a very useful tool for them to really prioritize early in the day. Message summarization, this is another new column to summarize in 2 words, and it works like beautifully. I manually reviewed many of those, and I was like, boy, they're like right up. It's just large language model really are good at summarizing things. You think they're good at creating things, but they're good at summarizing things as well. And which dealing with a lot of information, that's actually a pretty good usage of that. And so this is the zoom in about the summarized 2 word. And you'll notice that it's very simple. Potential bite, coded symptoms, urinary problems, multiple medical issues, request appointment. Remember I was talking about that? Genetic test results, I was asking about that. And coded test request, discuss lab results. And, so all these are very straightforward that help you to triage. And but that's what the operational people on the hospital side care about. Something that makes information processing, task prioritization much quicker. It's not crazy sexy that you're seeing that automatically creates these random chats or interesting, engaging conversations. It's these things. They're boring, but they're super helpful. Just think about boring, super helpful tasks. In their chief medical officer, they said, I want a generative AI to help with administrative tasks, administrative staff first. Don't worry about the clinical people. If our contact center can be more efficient, that's a big win for the health system. So go back to what Nicholai was saying as well. Just focus on these administrative stuff. Right? So this is the 2 words, chest pain. Okay. And that was the very urgent message. That was the example. Suggested response, it's beautiful. It was indeed very very good. And by going through some of the test samples that we got, but guess what? The clinical leader, they don't want to use it yet. They feel like it's still a little bit unproven. And you write these things, and are they good enough? Do they reflect how hospital like to convey the message to the patient? In this case, they are still reluctant to use it. That's a reality. And that's why I'm saying that you think it's super, super cool, but get these ideas tested by the hospital first. Are they ready to use it? The technology may be perfect. Maybe they're just not thinking they're ready yet, right? So this is very useful. Some of the architecture, but what it does is that it's a Python Docker container interacting with the message operation module. It's a nice add-on, super easy, very easy. Just the model, everything is local, so it does not go to the cloud. And so Bower, that's one of the reasons that people like to use it, and because it's all local, you don't have to make it to the cloud. And, but of course, OpenAI and Microsoft, they all have their local version now, and so you can feel free to take advantage of those technology. And then, just sort of I want to close on my talk, just to revisit this topic that Nicholai mentioned. But provide a different spin. What could a ChatGPT use for healthcare? So this famous doctor, David Ash, and he published in this New England Journal of Medicine Catalyst. It's a medical journal, talks about a variety of things, and a lot of it is about operational improvement and lots of issues related to the business of healthcare. And he basically asked ChatGPT this question. When you have a question, ask ChatGPT, right? What are the big opportunities for using ChatGPT in healthcare? The first one, virtual assistant for patient care, right? Create a virtual assistant, help patients schedule appointments, answer questions, provide information. That's what Nicholai did. And it's perfect. That's exactly what we think the value is. Clinical documentation. You probably saw, I think it was today, it was Amazon and Mail, they created a kind of a clinical documentation widget that uses generative AI to create notes. And so it's another important usage. We're looking at this for our product as well. We have a EHR product outside of the United States. It's used by pretty much all the large hospitals and the government. This will be a great way to save time and will be awesome. Medical research and analyze large volume data. We were just talking about earlier, right? What could be useful if I say, well, have other people look at the same problem before? What are the findings? I don't have to manually search them. It used to be my medical student do that, but now if I don't have a medical student, what can I do? I ask ChatGPT, right? It's pretty good. Medical education, right? This will be awesome as well. And education for medical students, and so on. And patient engagement, again, is helping the patient, right? So all this are, I think ChatGPT is not wrong on these areas. We're not replacing doctors here, and let's help the operational team be very good, make it more efficient, and help the patient. This actually will really improve healthcare quite a bit. So that closed my talk. Is that another talk? And I'll give it back to Dean.
Thank you, Chi. Pretty cool, huh? You guys like those presentations? Pretty awesome. All right. Thank you all again for coming. We have this room until 7:30, so please feel free to keep talking amongst yourselves, keep networking. That's part of the point of all this. I think you could see from these presentations that at InterSystems, we love to explore, to experiment with technology, to find what's helpful, what's useful. And one of the whole reasons for doing these meetups is to share some of the things that we're learning. But we also want it to be a conversation, kind of a community. So we absolutely love to hear what you are doing and learning, and to have it be where there are other voices here at these meetups as well, so that we're all sharing and learning together. That's what we're up to with these meetups. And again, we're here every month, so please join us again. Thank you all for coming. If you have any questions or anything, you can follow up either here with Nicholai and with Chi and others on the InterSystems staff. Again, you can see it on our badges, or later on LinkedIn, for example. Thank you all for coming.
That's how
I'm just getting accelerated skill after proficiency and now it's learning. I need I talked to teachers, but I want to have a meeting with Correct and no second correction. A lot more correct than that. That's like SAT level. Like, it's either correct or it's wrong. I was like, that's cheating. My job is to generate scores.